Welcome to another episode of the Sports Sentiment. I am your host, Nick Urias, and we are back once again talking college football. It is week 12, and we are starting to hit the home stretch of the college football season. San Jose State versus Boise State, number 13, Boise State Broncos to be exact. It's a big game in San Jose this weekend in the Bay Area, and I know a lot of Spartan fans are hyped up to watch the Spartans and the Broncos duke it out this Saturday at 4 p.m. at CEFQ Stadium. It's a big game for San Jose State. I could get into the history and all of that good stuff on just the significance of this one and what it means in San Jose, but we got ourselves another guest on the podcast this week to talk this very matchup. So let's bring him on in. He is former beat writer for Boise State football and Boise State athletics and is currently covering Mountain West football at Hero Sports. Ron Counts. Ron, thanks for coming on the podcast and excited to talk this very matchup with you.
Yeah, I'm happy to be on it. And you're right. This is a big game. This is a San Jose State team that's really been up and down this year, but they've really, they're in the top echelon of this Mountain West this year. That they got a really dominant offense, a lot of experience on defense. And this is a big game for Boise State. Every game at this point in the season is big for Boise State. They're staying in that CFP hunt. They're staying in the Mountain West title hunt. So this is going to be a big one this weekend.
Most definitely. And I you talked about San Jose State. They're on the top half of the conference. I thought last week was just such a big win for them. I was out there in Corvallis versus Oregon State. You could just tell they needed the game so badly. The way things were kind of sputtering offensively, and just the way the rivalry game went versus Fresno State, laying an egg there, really not showing up. The effort wasn't really there, and to respond the way that they did versus Oregon State and get a really strong win, 24-13 win at Corvallis. They had a lot of players step up. Nick Nash, we'll definitely talk about him quite a bunch in this very podcast, as we have pretty much all year. DJ Harvey, I thought, was ultimately the big time difference maker for San Jose State with the pick six to really blow the game open and really change the momentum of it. And then there was just some other really big, there's the turnover in the first half, in the first quarter. There was just a bunch of big momentum plays, and Oregon State, the way that they like to do things, run the ball, dominate the time of possession. It just seemed like the game was over once when they were down two possessions, and ultimately was. But Boise State, Ron, you kind of talked about it. I mean, they're right in the CFP hunt. This is preseason. They were pretty hyped up to kind of be in the CFP hunt, and here they are. They've kind of answered all the questions. The big game for them was the Oregon game in week 2. And, they kind of raised a lot of eyebrows in that game, only losing to the Ducks by 3. And obviously that's probably the best loss, and, that's ultimately what you want on your resume. Losing that game by 3 at Eugene, the Broncos have just been so good, so impressive. And it all starts with their head coach, Spencer Danielson.
Yeah, I mean, Spencer's a guy that just, right away last year after Andy Avalos got fired, right away it was clear that Spencer had the love and respect of his team. He has the trust of that locker room. You look at the last 4 games of last season; those guys played their butts off. Their defense was way more aggressive. So, I mean, I think hiring Spencer was a home run for Boise State. You look at other guys that were in the candidate pool. Guys that had more impressive resumes like Bronco Mendenhall, even Jeff Choate, a former Boise State assistant, Montana State head coach, Texas Code DC. I mean, he's got all the chops. But Spencer is just the guy to run this program right now. And I think Spencer's brand of football, his brand of leadership, is what is needed in this day of college football. Because it's not enough to say, oh, I'm playing for Boise State. It's not enough to say I'm playing for Alabama. You got to win the hearts of these players. And Spencer Danielson does that. He's a guy that is open about his faith. He's open about how much he loves his players. He just has the love of that locker room. And that's why, outside of the quarterback, Taylor Green, they didn't lose anybody to the transfer portal last year. They kept Ashton Jeanty. They kept all that talent at wide receiver and on defense. So, I mean, these players love Spencer Danielson. They want to play for him, and that is important. In this day and age of NIL and the transfer portal, players have more power than ever. If they don't like their coach, if they don't want to play for that guy, they're gone. They're hopping in the portal. They're going to get some more NIL money somewhere else. Spencer has these guys believing in the blue collar work ethic, the we before me mentality. He has them believing in all those coaching, coach speak things. These kids love him. They're going to play for him. They're not going anywhere. This team is heading in the right direction.
Yeah, and when you just hear him talk in his press conferences or after the game or mid game when they interview him, you could just feel the energy, and you could totally see why players want to play for him. I'm a big fan of head coach Spencer Danielson, and pretty much ever since, like you said, Avalos, they kicked him out of Boise, and they promoted him. He was the interim head coach. It just seemed like there was just a completely different culture change there, and they've carried last year's momentum to winning the Mountain West Championship to this year. And they've definitely just been a fun team to watch from start to finish this year. Let's talk about Ashton Jeanty, because this is the guy that let's just be honest. He's there's no disputing it. He's a Heisman front runner here. He's with Travis Hunter and Cam Ward and a bunch of other terrific players. But what he's doing is just incredible. I mean, 1,700 rushing yards this season. He's got 22, 23 touchdowns this season. I mean, I feel like, he's obviously the vocal point in this offense, and, he's the guy, and he's going to get a lot of respect. But for him to back it up, and, everyone knew, and I know this, Ron, for what the 1-2 punch between him and George Holani, like the last several years. Now that Holani's gone, this is really just his backfield now. I mean, this kind of breakout was coming, but I think it's good to see. I know a lot of people on the West Coast already knew about him, but the fact that he's getting national media love, I think, is just great, and it's good for the conference, of course.
Yeah, I mean, Ashton Jeanty is one of those special players. It's hard to describe what it is, but Ashton Jeanty has it. He's one of those guys. I'm going to throw out the names. You think about guys like Barry Sanders, Michael Vick, LaDainian Tomlinson. He's one of those guys that you just know a big play is coming. Every time he touches the ball, he can take it 80 yards to the house. He can make 12 guys miss and just dominate a whole defense. He's just an amazing running back. And I mean, I said it back in 2020 when he showed up at Boise State. He was the most physically impressive looking freshman I ever saw in my life. He was jacked. I mean, he's like 2% body fat. You think about a guy that's like 5'9", 215, and squats more than 600 pounds. I mean, he squats 3 times his body weight. That's just not normal. It's not human sometimes. So I mean, he's got the vision, he's got the power, he's got the speed. But the greatest thing that Ashton Jeanty has is contact balance. Barry Sanders, LaDainian Tomlinson-esque contact balance. The first guy never brings him down. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a guy take his legs out and somehow Jeanty just keeps his feet. He hurdles a dude. He spins away from a dude. I mean, his vision, his instincts, they're next level. He's going to be a first-round NFL draft pick. He's going to be in New York, whether he wins the Heisman or not. He's going to be in New York. If I was still a Heisman voter, he would certainly have my vote. It's going to be tough. Travis Hunter's a unicorn. How many guys play both sides of the ball? Cam Ward's a touchdown machine. I mean, it's tough. The running back from Iowa, Caleb. I'm blanking on his last name, but he's putting together an amazing season. So I mean, there's a lot of competition there. But none of these guys are putting on a historic show the way Ashton Jeanty is. I mean, he has a real shot to break Barry Sanders' single-season rushing record. This week, he's probably going to break Boise State's single-season rushing record. He only needs 89 yards to break that record. So he's going to be hungry this week. He's going to be hungry for that Heisman. I just think there's no weakness in his game. He's a great pass blocker. He catches the ball well out of the backfield. He does everything well. So I mean, how do you slow him down? I don't know. We saw sort of the blueprint the last couple of weeks, right? San Diego State, UNLV, they both sold out. They both had 9, 10 guys in the box trying to stop him. But then you leave the rest of the offense open. Then you get burned by the passing game. So, I mean, it's kind of a pick your poison, but good luck slowing down Ashton Jeanty. No one's done it yet.
Yeah, and I even talked to some of the San Jose State players this week about that. The linebacker Jordan Cobbs who had a turnover last week. Just like what's not necessarily what's the game plan, but how do you have that healthy balance of stacking the box, but at the same time respecting a guy like Maddox Matson, who's got himself some very talented wide receivers, Latrell Caples, Cam Camper. I mean, they've been targeting Matt Lauder, the tight end. That seems to be Matson's favorite target these days. I mean, just kind of that healthy balance. And he said, in some ways, like Jeanty's gonna get his, but we can't get burnt by both, basically. And you said Jeanty's gonna get his triple digit yardage. It's just let's just be real. That's just the way it goes. He's gonna have himself a much more heavier dosage here, especially down the stretch this season. He's had like 30 carries the past two games, which is a lot, especially since was nursing with that arm injury, that big old cast, which is impossible to miss on game days. But He's going to get his, and I think it's going to come down to, for San Jose State in this type of game, they're going to give up points. There's no disputing that. But can they replicate that with and go pound to pound with Boise State? And I think they could in this one. San Jose State, this is an offense and a quarterback situation that's kind of been all over the place, but they figured out their guy. It's Walker Eget. He's gonna go and command this offense. They got a stud wide receiver in Nick Nash, who's got over 1,100 receiving yards and is leaving the country in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns after last week's game at Oregon State. So really, for the Spartans, they're just gonna have to go do their thing on offense, put up touchdowns, not field goals, because Boise State is going to hit the end zone. Ron, I think this has the opportunity in San Jose this weekend to be an absolute shootout, and could be one of those things where whoever makes that one stop on defense ultimately comes up with it. But you can't dispute that there's playmakers all over the place on both sides, with Nick Nash and Ashton Jeanty really just being the two box office guys.
Totally agree. And one more thing about Ashton Jeanty. I mean, all you need to know about the type of season that he's having is if you keep him under 200 yards, you've done your job. I mean, just think about that for a minute. If you keep a guy under 200 yards, you're happy. Just insane season. Now, you talk about San Jose State. They're a team for me where two words come to mind: toughness and resilience. I mean, this year they've shown so much guts in so many games. I mean, you talk about Nick Nash. I mean, he's got to be, if he hasn't already, he's got to be close to setting single season records at San Jose State. You're talking to a guy who's not physically all that dominant. He's not going to run a 4.40. He's a former quarterback, smart guy, but I mean, just a guy that wills himself to win those one-on-one battles and runs great routes. And what toughness in the running game this year. I mean, Floyd Chalk is way better than I thought he was going to be this year. That running game is legitimate this year. And then you talk about toughness. What about the toughness and the courage it took for a new head coach to step away from Emmett Brown after the start of the season he had and go to Walker Egan? I mean, that took a lot of guts, a lot of cojones for that coaching staff to do, and it's going to pay off. I mean, I really like San Jose State this year. I mean, Nash is going to get his numbers, just like Ashton Jeanty. No one's stopping Nick Nash right now. And I know there's a really great dynamic with him and Walter Egan. I believe they're roommates, right?
Correct.
I know they're long friends, and that's really paid off this year. So, I mean, I love that offense at San Jose State. The one thing I'm a little bit worried about there was at San Jose State, especially this week, is their defense. Their defense has been up and down this year. There's a lot of experience there at all three levels, and they've had some great games, right? They held Air Force to 10 points or held them under 200 rushing yards in the game. I mean, great games there, but then they've had some really clunkers like at Fresno State. So they can't afford to have a clunker this week. I mean, if you miss a tackle on Ashton Jeanty, he's gone. So I think that defense is going to have to play its best game of the year just to hang with Boise State.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm with you there 100%. And I think, offensively, like I said, for Boise State, if they get the pass game and the run game going, then it's going to be a long day for the Spartans. But at the same time, Boise State defense is going to also have their hands full as well. We talked about Nick Nash, but another guy that's not kind of getting a whole lot of national recognition because of all the Nash attention is a guy like Justin Lockhart. I mean, this is a guy last year didn't play a single game for San Jose State, dealt with an arm injury, was out for the year, but this is a guy who, kind of was still trying to settle in with Walker Egan at quarterback and was clearly frustrated in a loss versus Fresno State. But I thought last week was a big week for him because they targeted him 5 times. He caught 4 long balls. And it's one of those things, right? You can't let Boise State's air attack and ground attack going. Well, if you have Nick Nash and Justin Lockhart going in the spread and shred offense led by Craig Stutzman, it's gonna be a long day for the defense. And Boise State, I feel like they got to be ready. And I know that secondary is really good with Ty Benefield at safety. They got McCoy at the cornerback position. It's a homecoming game for him. He's from East Palo Alto, and they got Jeremiah Araby as well. So that secondary's got to be ready for Boise State. But if the Spartans could get Nash and Lockhart going, I don't think they're going to run the ball they're not going to run the ball really in this game because us Spartan fans have been preaching they got to run the ball, and they only ran the ball like 10 times last week in the past couple weeks. I think this is just going to be an air it out type game, and hopefully the offensive line gives them some time like to Walker Egan like last week did.
Well, and you touched on it there. That passing game is why Boise State could be on upset alert this week. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they are. I think in my prediction, Boise State wins this game pretty comfortably. But if there's a weakness at Boise State this year, it is that secondary. You talked about McCoy, Irby, all those safeties. They only have like 4 interceptions on the season. They're one of the worst teams in the country in creating turnovers. And that pass defense is susceptible. We've seen it in big games. They give up the long ball a lot. They're also going to be missing one of their most experienced tacklers, in Alexander Tubner, who suffered an injury and probably isn't going to play this week. So he really is the heart and soul of that defense. He's a great tackler, maybe the best tackler on that team. So that could pay off big time. But I mean, if there's a way that San Jose State beats Boise State, it's by chewing them up through the air and forcing a couple turnovers. That's what they got to do. No one's really done that well against Boise State this year, but if San Jose State can force Maddox Madison into a couple mistakes and they can convert some of those long balls to Nash and Lockhart, you're right that it could be an upset waiting to happen.
And I'll tell you this much, Ron. This matchup and this little series history, the past, I would say 3 matchups, it's been pretty close. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
last year on the Blue in Boise, it was a 28-7 Spartan lead. Chevin Cordero was kind of doing his thing, and he was airing it out to Nash. And, the Spartans had themselves a 3-touchdown lead until they didn't. Maddox Matson, that's when Maddox Matson and I'm blanking on his
Taylor
name.
Green. Taylor
Thank
Green.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, they had that 2 quarterback system going under head coach Andy Avalos, and I know Avalos was under the hot seat at that time, and there was a whole lot of a loud noise coming from the Boise State fan base, and that was a game that Boise State came back down 3 touchdowns and won the game, and the Spartans kind of let that one go, and ultimately at the end of the season, that's a game that hurt the Spartans from being in the Mountain West Championship game, and that was a tough loss for San Jose State. The 2020 Mountain West Championship game between the
Big one.
Spartans and the
Yeah.
Broncos. Great story for San Jose State that year to beat Boise State at Sam Boyd Stadium. And the last time these two teams played in San Jose, can you believe it, Ron? In 2019, you got to love the way the
Crazy.
schedule works that way.
Yeah.
2019, San Jose State lost this game 52-42 at SEFQ Stadium. So this has been a pretty tight series here, no matter where the game's played, on a neutral, on the road, for at home for these respective teams. I don't know. I kind of think this game has a chance to be close, but like we said, Ashton Jeanty, they got to contain him. I don't think they really will. And it's just a matter of time of possession and things like that, and turnovers and field position and all of that stuff. But I just found that the past 3 games within this series to be pretty intriguing in how close it's been.
Yeah, it's not a sure win for the Broncos by any means. And it's funny that you mentioned that 2019 game. That was one of my first games on the Boise State beat. George Halani had a huge game that day. He just came back from injury. I think he returned a punt for a touchdown late in that game. He was huge in that win. But I mean, as you look at Boise State this year, and when you look for like a deciding factor every week, you can talk about Ashton Jeanty all you want. You mentioned Matt Lauder. He's having a great season. He has a chance to be the first Boise State tight end to catch more than 30 passes since 2017. Really having a great season. And we talk about the defense, the receivers. All those guys are great. But in my opinion, these last 3-4 games of the season, none of them are going to be the deciding factor in who wins these games. It's going to be offensive coordinator Dirk Cutter. Dirk Cutter right now has got to find a way to get Jeanty his touches, but make sure the rest of the offense is dangerous as well. He's got to make sure defenses are respecting the whole offense, not just Ashton Jeanty. And he can do that. And this is the guy that, hey, he's got head coaching experience. He coached in the NFL. He mentored guys like Matt Ryan. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to get the most out of his players. And he's going to have to get really creative because everyone knows right now the way to beat Boise State is to stop Ashton Jeanty. So the question for Dirk Cutter is, how do you make them respect everyone else? How do you open up lanes? How do you give opportunities to Ashton Jeanty while including the rest of the offense? That's what we're going to learn in the next couple of weeks. And I think we're going to see a lot more of a quick passing game from Boise State here soon. The teams are going to start really loading that box up and really trying to pressure Maddox. I would see like a little bit of a West Coast offense coming in the next few weeks. A lot of 5-6 yard slants, a lot of bubble screens. I would expect that for the next couple of weeks. But Dirk Cutter's got to maybe call his most creative games of his career here in these next 3 weeks.
I love it, and that's a very good point. And just to kind of piggyback on that in a sense, and how the Spartans could potentially load up the box in this game, and how teams could be doing that down the road, down the stretch this season. San Jose State's going to be without their leading tackler, Jordan Pollard, for the first half of this game, which I think is just a massive blow. I mean, let's just be honest, and Spartan fans already know this. The refs at Oregon State were not kind to them at all. Coach Kenny Amatololo very frustrated at the end of the game despite the win. And Jordan Pollard, the leading tackler, kind of the center fielder in the linebacker position, kind of their do-it-all guy, kind of really just brings the energy on defense. He's going to be not playing in this game because he had a targeting penalty late in the fourth quarter. So without having him in the first half, they will have him back in the second half, of course. But to start out the game there, that's gonna be very rough for San Jose State defensively. And the Spartans, especially in that first half, when they don't have Pollard, they got to just make sure the game is close and they're just holding up on defense, and the offense is just kind of following up with whatever Boise State's offense is doing on the scoreboard. Because if this game is a three-possession Boise State lead in the second half, and Jeanty's running wild, and the Broncos are running on all cylinders, and Dirk Cutter's basically doing whatever he wants on the playbook, and then you get Pollard back in the second half, that's not going to be the greatest sight to see for San Jose State in this one. So I thought that's just something that I think a lot of people need to realize going into this game, that San Jose State's gonna be without their star linebacker.
That's a huge loss when you're facing a guy like Ashton Jeanty. Huge loss. I'll say this: the equation for San Jose State to win this week is winning on third down and putting together long drives to limit Jeanty's opportunities and forcing a couple turnovers. If they can force 2 turnovers in this game, they have a shot to win.
Ron, before we close things out here on the podcast, just want to kind of get your sense here on just not only the Mountain West, but just kind of Boise State in particular. Like, with this new revamped college football playoff, like, this is brand new to everybody. 12 teams, kind of expanded postseason format. Boise State, they're not only going to probably be the at-large group of 5 team, but they got a chance to even get higher here if teams above on top kind of, take some bad losses or, slip up along the way down the stretch. I think Boise State is personally going to be in the playoff, kind of representing the Mountain West. But I personally think, depending on whatever the matchup is, they got a chance to even make some noise and even win a game, especially if this team is healthy and, firing all cylinders. And like you said, Dirk Cutter, offensive coordinator, is just completely comfortable and running whatever he wants here. So I think Boise State has to do something historic here in this conference going into the postseason play in January.
Totally agree. I mean, you look at Boise State, if they run the table and win the Mountain West Championship, they're 12-1 Mountain West champion. I mean, they're going to be in line for a top 4 seed, not even just a top 5 seed. They could get that first round bye depending on how things play out. I totally agree with you. I wrote a column last week about how the last 2 weeks for Boise State has proven that they're more of a complete team. It's not just the Ashton Jeanty show, and that bodes really well for them winning a playoff game. Now, the seeding is going to be very important. You get a top 4 seed, you get a first round bye, and maybe a little bit more of a winnable game. You get that 12 seed, it's a little bit tougher. You look at the projections already. The projected face, Ohio State, or think about that game. Think about Boise State versus Ohio State. Ashton Jeanty, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Junkins, Jeremiah Smith, all on the same field. Like that is box office television right there. I mean, that'd be a great game. But can Boise State beat Ohio State? I don't know. That's going to be the question. But so I think if they get that 12 seed and have to play one of the premier teams in college football, it's going to be tougher to get that first round win. But if they can get that 4 seed and get that first round bye, they're in line. I think they can win a game there.
Yeah, and we should mention as well, those first round games are in, the home stadiums of these teams, which I think is just awesome personally. The fact that you get to have the whatever at Buckeye Stadium, 80,000 screaming on the top of their lungs if a Boise State goes in there, or wherever Boise State lands and they end up playing, if they're in the playoff, like, that is just going to be some incredible environments that really we've never seen before. So whether Boise State is in it or not, I'm just excited to watch the playoffs just in general, just to see, the neutral sites are, exciting, but there's just nothing like those home field environments with the kids and the students and, all the alums and everybody else in between, just going crazy. But San Jose State versus Boise State this Saturday at 4 p.m. at CEFCU Stadium. It's one of the bigger games at CEFCU Stadium in recent memory. I mean, this is the highest ranked team that San Jose State's going to be playing since Fresno State in 2013, when Derek Carr and Devontae Adams came to town. So, and this Boise State team is higher ranked. So big game in San Jose, to say the least. And it's going to be an exciting one with a whole lot of box office players taking the field in the Bay Area. Ron, Where can people find your work of covering Mountain West football and covering college football as a whole? Where can people find your work for the rest of the season here?
Yeah, they can check me out at herosports.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at Ron the Scribe.
There you have it. Ron Counts from Hero Sports, formerly covering Boise State football and covering Mountain West football and college football as a whole. Ron, thanks for coming on the podcast, and we'll most definitely be talking down the road.
Yeah, have me on anytime. Thanks a lot.
Once again, I am your host, Nick Urias, and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.